a quiet corner of a busy city inside an upscale restaurant that people from the rich side of town loved to visit. The place was always filled with soft music, golden lights, and the sound of polished glasses touching marble tables. And in the middle of all this, there worked a young waitress who moved silently from one table to another, making sure every guest got what they wanted. She was polite, gentle, and always kept her eyes down as if she didn't want attention in any way. Most people barely noticed her. They simply saw her uniform, placed an order, and then forgot she existed, but behind her calm face was a story that no one there knew. When she was younger, she had a big dream. She wanted to become a pianist. She grew up in a small apartment where music was her only escape from daily struggles. An old neighbor had a dusty old piano, and seeing her interest, he taught her the basics. She practiced every single day, slowly falling in love with the instrument. She imagined herself playing on a big stage one day, with people listening in silence, moved by her music. But dreams often collide with real life. Her family ran into financial problems, and she had to leave her training to help them. She took small jobs, then bigger jobs, until finally she landed here, in this restaurant, where her days were long and her dreams stayed quietly hidden inside her heart. That evening, the restaurant was more crowded than usual. A private gathering was happening in the main hall. A group of elite guests, well known for their business success, wealth, and showy lifestyles, had rented the entire space for a celebration. The staff was rushing around because these were guests who complained about tiny things: a glass being slightly warm, a chair not pushed in exactly right, a plate not placed perfectly symmetrical. The waitress had learned to stay patient and gentle no matter how rude people could be. She knew her job depended on her calm attitude. When the main group finally arrived, the atmosphere changed even more. One man in particular caught everyone's attention. He walked with the confidence of someone who believed the world worked only for him. He spoke loudly, ordered loudly, and even laughed loudly, as if he wanted everyone in the room to notice him. The staff whispered about how he was known for showing off and for enjoying moments where he could put others down just to feel more powerful. The waitress watched from a distance, silently hoping she wouldn't be the one he called. She was used to rude customers, but something about this man made her uneasy. His eyes were sharp, and he loved making his companions laugh by joking about the staff. Every time she walked near their table, he gave her a look as if she was invisible, yet somehow beneath him at the same time. As the night went on, the group began talking loudly about success, about talent, and about how some people never rise because they have nothing special inside them. Their words spread across the hall like smoke. One of the guests mentioned musicians and how true talent can't hide even in a crowd. Another laughed and pointed at the staff, saying something like, "Who knows? Maybe one of them thinks they are talented too." The group burst into laughter. That comment made an older staff member nearby smile awkwardly. As a small joke to lighten the mood, he quietly said that the young waitress could play piano quite well. He didn't mean harm, he just wanted to help the conversation shift to something more positive. But instead, the millionaire overheard this and immediately turned toward the waitress with a smirk. "Oh, really?" he said loudly, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You can play, you?" His voice carried disbelief wrapped in rudeness. The waitress froze. She hadn't expected this. She simply kept her eyes lowered. The man leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Well then, why don't you prove it? There's a grand piano right here. Play something for us." Everyone suddenly turned toward her. The waiters paused. The guests looked curious. The room grew strangely quiet. The waitress felt her heartbeat quickening. She had not touched a real piano in years. She had only passed by this grand piano every day, dusting it, wiping its surface, and silently wishing she could sit before it again. Now, all eyes were on her, but not in support, mostly expecting a failure. Expecting her to embarrass herself so they could laugh. "I'm just here to serve," she said softly, trying to step back, but the man interrupted. "Come on, don't be shy. Show us your talent, or is it that you were lying? Maybe you can't play at all?" The tone in his voice was sharp, mocking, almost daring her to refuse so he could make another joke at her expense. His friends waited for her answer like someone waiting to see a show. She felt small, smaller than she had felt in a long time. Part of her wanted to walk away, pretend she hadn't heard him. But deep inside, something else stirred, an old feeling. An old fire she thought she had forgotten. She looked at the piano. It was shining under the lights, the lid open, the keys perfectly clean. It reminded her of her younger days, of dreams she once believed in, of music she once poured her heart into. A thought passed through her mind. Maybe, just maybe, this challenge was not an insult but an unexpected chance. She took a slow breath. Her hands were shaking. She felt every eye watching her. Some guests watched with curiosity. Others watched with amusement, expecting a moment they would later tell their friends about. The millionaire leaned forward, waiting for her to make a mistake. The waitress finally nodded. She did not speak. She simply walked toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, but something inside her kept pushing her forward. The room was so quiet that even the soft sound of her shoes could be heard. She reached the piano, gently pulled the bench back, and sat down. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest. She placed her fingers above the keys but did not touch them yet. She closed her eyes for a moment. Memories flooded her mind, her old neighbor smiling proudly during her first lesson, the sound of her childhood apartment where she practiced until late hours. The moment she had to walk away from her dream for the sake of her family. All of these moments came together like pieces of a story she had tried to forget but never truly could. When she opened her eyes, she saw the reflection of the chandelier on the piano lid. She took one more deep breath. The entire room waited. Some guests leaned closer. Others whispered, wondering what would happen. Even the waiter stood still at the edges of the hall. Her fingers hovered above the keys. There was a silence so deep it felt as if the world itself had paused. And then just as the tension reached its peak, she gently pressed her first note. And in that very instant, the entire room shifted. The sound was soft but clear, pure, and unexpectedly emotional. The tone carried a warmth and confidence no one imagined she had. The people who expected a clumsy mistake suddenly found themselves frozen, surprised by the quality of the sound. But the story of how the room reacted, how the guests changed, and how that single moment transformed her life. When the waitress played that very first note, the sound floated through the hall in a way no one expected. It was soft at the beginning, almost shy, but it carried something deep inside it, something honest, something full of years she had lived quietly, hiding her true self. People who were ready to laugh suddenly found their lips pressing together. As if the sound held them still, she continued with the next few notes, and each one was clearer than the last. Her hands trembled at first, but as the music grew, her fingers remembered the path they had learned long ago. Something inside her slowly unlocked. Her shoulders relaxed, and her heartbeat, though fast, began to match the rhythm she played. The hall, once filled with loud conversations and clinking glasses, became silent in a way that even surprised the staff. The waiters stopped walking. The chefs peeking from the kitchen doorway stood still. The elite guests who once sat with confident, almost arrogant expressions, now leaned back and listened with a strange calmness in their faces. The man who had challenged her, the one who expected to see her fail, watched with his eyebrows raised. His amused smirk had disappeared. He wasn't laughing anymore. He looked uncomfortable, then confused, and finally impressed, though he tried not to show it. As she continued, the music took a different turn. What started quietly grew warmer, fuller. It was as though the instrument understood her feelings and responded. She played not to impress them, not to prove anything, but simply to let her heart speak in the one language she knew better than any other. Memories came to her as she played. She remembered sitting in her neighbor's small living room, carefully practicing each scale. She remembered the encouragement she once received, the moment she realized she had talent, and the day she had to leave it all behind. She remembered tears that never touched her cheeks but stayed stuck in her chest, making her feel heavier every year. And now, in front of a room full of strangers, all those hidden feelings were finding their way out through her fingertips. A few guests felt something shift inside them listening to her. Some of them had spent their lives chasing expensive things, chasing status, chasing power, yet none of those things had ever touched their hearts. the way this simple moment did. A few had tears forming in their eyes without even realizing it. It was the kind of music that reminded people of what they once loved. And maybe forgot. The waitress didn't look up once. She didn't need to. She was lost in the sound, lost in the warmth of the keys. Every note she played connected her past to her present like a thread stitching two worlds together. After a few moments, the piece reached a point where the melody softened again. It felt like someone taking a gentle breath after speaking their heart out. She let her fingers glide lightly over the piano, finishing the last phrase with care, almost as if she didn't want the moment to end too quickly. And then, finally, the music stopped. There was a long, heavy silence. Not the awkward kind, this one was peaceful. It was the kind of silence that fills a room when people are still caught in a feeling they haven't quite processed. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys. Her fingers felt warm and her heart felt like it was beating somewhere close to her throat. She didn't dare look at anyone. She didn't know whether they would laugh, clap, or remain quiet in confusion. Then, out of nowhere, someone started clapping. Just one person. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire room broke into applause, loud, sincere, and full of surprise. Some guests even stood up. It was the kind of applause people give when something touches them unexpectedly. Something real. The waitress looked up, startled. She didn't expect this. She expected judgment. She expected jokes. But instead she found faces that looked almost grateful. Some guests nodded at her with respect, something she had never received from them before. Even the man who had challenged her was clapping slowly at first, as if he wasn't sure he wanted to admit he had been wrong, but he clapped anyway. His ego didn't disappear, but the smirk definitely had. When the applause finally softened, the man cleared his throat and spoke, trying to regain some of the control he had lost. "I didn't know you could play like that," he admitted. Though his voice sounded a bit stiff, she simply nodded. Not knowing what to say, one of the women from the group approached her with a warm smile. "That was beautiful," she said. "You should be on a stage, not carrying trays." The waitress smiled shyly. Compliments felt unfamiliar, almost unreal. Another guest, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes, stepped closer. He said he taught music at a community center and that he had connections with people who organized local events. He looked at her as if he had discovered something rare. "If you ever want to return to music," he said softly, "I would be happy to guide you. People need to hear what you played tonight." She didn't know how to respond. Her mind felt full. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Another part was scared. She had built her life around responsibilities, not dreams. Still, hearing someone offer her a chance made her chest feel warm. The restaurant manager, who had been watching everything, quietly approached her when the guests weren't looking. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, "I didn't know you had this talent. You made tonight unforgettable." "Thank you." Meanwhile, the millionaire who had challenged her stood awkwardly by his chair. He looked like someone who wanted to speak but didn't quite know how. Finally, he walked up to her slowly. The guests around him watched, curious. He cleared his throat again. "I underestimated you," he said, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "That wasn't fair of me." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was honest enough. For a man like him, even those few words were difficult. She nodded politely and replied, "It's all right." And for her, it truly was. She didn't hold anger. She didn't want revenge. Her music had already given her everything she needed. As the night went on, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. People were softer, kinder. Conversations shifted from showing off to actually talking. The waitress continued her shift, but something was different now. People looked at her with respect. Not as someone invisible. When she finally walked into the staff room after everything ended, she sat down quietly. For the first time in a long while, she felt her dream breathe again. The sound of the piano was still echoing inside her mind, and each echo felt like a reminder of who she once was, and who she could become again. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know whether she would return to music seriously or if life would pull her in another direction. But she knew one thing for sure: the part of her she thought was gone had come back to life in front of an entire room. One simple challenge meant to embarrass her had instead reopened a door she thought was permanently closed. Outside, the guests left the restaurant still talking about her performance. Some said they had never heard something so emotional. Others wondered how such talent could stay hidden for so long. Word spread quickly, even beyond the restaurant, and in the middle of all this, the young waitress walked home under the night sky with a quiet smile. She felt lighter. She felt stronger. That night didn't just change how others saw her, it changed how she saw herself. And sometimes, that is all it takes for a life to begin again.